Lifers podcast. Get with it or get forgotten.
But I'm going to go on to the next one. It says, at what point, and we kind of touched on this, but at what point do you feel more comfortable? Do you, I guess, feel more comfortable giving a student more responsibility? And so, the way I interpret that question is, do you have like a checklist of kind of like, okay, when he can do this, when they can do this, they can do this, or is it just based on what that person wants out of the rotation? Like, how do you actually tackle that?
Yeah, that's great. And I think just as what you mentioned, it is part of that. Like, what do you want out of that rotation? Complemented that we still satisfy the requirements needed by college expectation. And then from there, then I think it's more of like, well, if we say it's dependent on the student themselves, and I'm trying to think of a situation of where I've been in that kind of, I guess here's the note: most interns get a little shaky when they come and see me, because my first 2 weeks, I'm going to load it up on questions that a lot of times they're not going to have the answers to.
Yes.
And I hear that up front, that I'm going to drop a lot of things. One's because I have the interns know with what classes you've been in, at least by the title and the subject matter. So they should have some appreciation. But with it, that's where I think I find what's your basis of knowledge, and I'll ask a lot of questions those first 2 weeks, and then based on those reasonings of what you give, even more than if it's the answer that I was looking for, is going to give me more of that direction to do so. On top of Kevin, it's that distinction. There are some that are just go-getters. They'll go in there, even if we're that first one, man, I did not really see that being shoulder impingement. And it's just like, you miss that question on the test, you never will miss it again. It's just always that one, and I'll never forget it. But I think that there's a lot of those individuals that really do, and they'll come at it because of that, and they'll take advantage. So I think it's more of like just do you have those aspirations, or do you just are, again, self-motivated to be proactive? And so as quick as I'd say, yeah, I can determine, man, some students come in there and they will take advantage to the fact that they want to do more, and which I feel that they can safely, which is always first respect, that many don't ever step outside that, is really the bigger component. So share with your CI, let them know. I think the communication's the bigger part, and why I do that the first 2 weeks is just to see what you're on stage, what your answer, what your response is. Because guess what? You're going to have patients asking you right then a lot of the same things where you're on stage. So
I'm curious, just for the sake of the audience, because I'm sure they're thinking about it. What's a few of those questions?
What would be a few
Yeah.
I think a balance, I think the first one is like, okay, what are like what are the three senses of balance, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
And so if you consider, okay, I've got vision, I've got vestibular, I got proprioceptive, great. Now, what are the four ways where we can change that balance, right? I want to lower center of mass. I want to widen my base of support. I want to lean towards the direction of what's coming towards me, and one which we can't add more mass, right? So I think those are some of the processes. But what I want you to know from that is then when you have a patient and they're trying to apply balance, and let's say you have them in, if you want to call it tandem or sharpened Romberg, and you find that they're really doing well, then now that you know those principles, key element, know those principles, you can be as creative as you want based on knowing what you're trying to apply. So again, not about the knowledge, but just what's the principles of what will allow for you to do a lot of difference. Open back position of the knee is another great one. You do manual therapy. Well, how long do you generally do manual therapy for a patient? What does that look like? Is that 2 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? And then based on that response, why would you say that? Those are probably of some general ones that I'd start off.
My mind is just turning.
Yeah.
I was just trying to answer all those in my head while you're asking those. So, and luckily I've actually answered some of those while at the case.
You heard maybe once.
Some of them. But okay, so I got the next one. This is actually I'm curious about this question as well. It says, how has outpatient changed since you first got out of school, and what we should expect come day one?
I mean, COVID, obviously, but I mean,
How has that changed? Actually, that's a good thing to how has that changed things?
Well, exactly. And from the more recent with our company expectation, as we were discussing about productivity being 1.4, now with our new current status, that's dropped to 1.2. And then again, with also your CDC guidelines and those additional measures, whether it's now screening questions, temperature take, wearing a protection mask. Yeah, and I mean, I'm surprised I haven't had any questions like that from you yet, Kevin, because I think that's some that I want to make sure that where, like my more recent intern, I called and spoke to her. I want to make sure that she felt comfortable, confident, safe within coming, because I know that there are many out there that are still of question. So I think that was another criteria of what we're trying to find from the students' fact, making sure that they also were abiding by those recommendations. I know the students in the recent class were highly encouraged to think before you go out and do things, and not for your own sake, but for those patients who you would be treating. I think those are the bigger adjustments. We did a lot of cleaning already, right, with sanitizing equipment and things, but I would say that's definitely stepped up to a higher level also.
Well, and just to add on to that, I'm curious about how has that affected your I guess your things you can do treating wise. Like, how, are you still joint doing manual stuff, joint mobs? Like, how has that been affected by it?
And in this instance, I think even by the contact at where I would say our therapists at our clinic, respectfully, if we're that we don't need to be in their face or nearby it, then we don't. Applications still with manual. I probably would say cervical being the bigger or primary. Have a few with PMJ, so we have to be somewhat close to proximity. But it's the same like of any. You're explaining. You're asking for whether their permission to do these things. And I haven't had any I guess response or suggestions to no, and if they did, that would be okay too. So that hasn't really changed from our elements here.
Okay, so circling back around, things that have changed. So we have COVID. What else has changed? Like, I'm assuming insurance has been a little bit of a change.
Well, I think even bigger was what this past year, and even moving to 2021 with our Medicare cut reimbursement, right?
Oh man,
15%, and how that's going to look. I can tell you, I know that there's been a lot of freezes on PTAs in the outpatient clinic, several different companies that I won't mention, but I think that's a critical component. Knowing that we're sort of allotted and lined up for this next year. So that's another big change. Telehealth, of course, that due to COVID, another big entity, not one that I have a lot of knowledge or yet experience. We've been able to keep up well within about 90% of what our budget is through the, I guess, primary means. But yeah, that's I know another one that has really try to advance, and let's see where and what we do. And then from there, maybe we can touch bases later, but just all the other snazzy treatments that are out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Snazzy. Not bad, just snazzy. They might be.
Fair enough. How's it's funny because I listened to that, and as a student, we're kind of in this incubator stage where we're not directly in it, but we hear the things around us. And the one thing that we're kind of always hearing is that productivity is just getting higher and higher, and the thought of one-on-one care is like unheard of now. And so like how has that changed in the last few years, based on what you've seen?
Right. And I mean, Kevin, and I'm just really impressed that your student body here has got some great questions, because I can tell you from back in 2015 when I graduated, whether as a student body, I don't really recollect those questions being asked, even though there was more than plenty of opportunities to have them asked.
Mm-hmm.
And ones I don't think many hit upon until, oh, now I'm looking for a job. And, oh, what do I do? And that's, I think, has come to a rude awakening on what is that productivity standard. One big reason why I am with Brooks is because they have that appreciation in the model to where we can and still do and choose, if we need to treat one-on-one, then we are able. No, it's not for the entire 8-hour day or shift, but still well within enough that where we can benefit the patient and still maintain, cost, expense, and profit margin and those kind of things. So I know it's still there because I'm in one of the companies which does. But to the same fact, I know that is not universal, but it is one thing that you can ask and be sure to before taking any job.
For sure. I can it's weird saying this because, this is recorded, but I definitely have this professional fear of being in a place that has such high productivity. But then again, I haven't been in that, so I don't know anything but any better than that. So I'm sure if I was to be put in it, I'll adjust as needed. But I love the thought of quality over quantity for sure.